They laughed when she struggled. They mocked when she sacrificed. And they even threw her out of the very house she built with her own hands. But what her family didn't know was that Sarah had a secret. A hidden empire that would one day make her the most powerful of them all. Welcome to Unspoken Story. Please subscribe and share with friends. Sometimes the strongest people are not the ones who shout the loudest. They are the ones who carry pain quietly. Quietly. Who walk through storms without telling the world how heavy the rain feels on their shoulders. Can you hear it? The sound of Lagos, the hum of generators, the call of market women, the beat of Afro music drifting from a roadside bar. It's a city that's always moving, always alive. And in a small, crowded compound on its outskirts, a young girl named Sarah learned how to be invisible. You see, in her family, there was a star, and it was not her. That star was her older brother, Peter. When Peter wanted new shoes, the money was found. When Peter passed an exam, the whole compound celebrated. But Sarah was the shadow. Her father would often say, with a sigh that felt like a door slamming, "Why waste money on a girl's education? She will only marry and leave." And her mother would just nod silently, her eyes on the floor. From a very young age, Sarah understood her place. Her dreams were not important. Her wants were a burden. But deep inside her quiet heart, a tiny, stubborn flame refused to go out. In the stillness of the night, she would make a promise to herself, a whisper so soft only she could hear it. "One day, I will stand on my own. One day, I will have a door with a lock and a key that belongs only to me." That day felt a lifetime away when Sarah finished school. There was no party, no congratulations. While Peter was packed off to a university with new clothes and a proud family, Sarah was told to find work. And so she did. She found a job in a tiny clothing stall in the middle of a massive, chaotic Lagos market. Her job was to fold shirts and arrange shoes on dusty shelves from sunrise until sunset. The pay was so small it barely covered her bus fare and a meager plate of rice. But it was a start. Her first home was a single room at the back of someone else's yard. Oh, that room! When the rains came, the roof leaked, and she would place a plastic bucket in the center of the floor. Plink, plink, plink. The sound of water hitting plastic was the soundtrack to her dreams. At night, she'd sometimes hear the scurry of rats across the floor. She had one thin mattress, a small stove, and that one plastic bucket that was her chair, her storage, her everything. Many, many nights, Sarah went to bed with a hollow, aching feeling in her stomach. She had to make a choice. Eat a full meal today, or save a few precious naira for tomorrow. And always, every single time, she chose saving. While other girls her age were buying new lip gloss or taking pictures at the beach, Sarah was in her leaking room, writing in a notebook. Not stories of fantasy, but plans, calculations, dreams made of cement and bricks. Her hands were always tired. Her feet were always sore. But her spirit was made of something stronger than fatigue. It was made of that whispered promise. There's a special kind of loneliness, you know? The loneliness of chasing a dream that no one else can see. When Sarah sent a little money home to her family, her parents would praise Peter, saying it was his future success that inspired her. They never once asked how she managed to save that money. They never saw the worn-down soles of her shoes, the same ones she wore year after year. They never saw her empty cupboard. Her colleagues at the market would sometimes laugh. "Sarah," they'd say, "why are you always working so hard? You need to live a little. Enjoy your life." And Sarah would just smile a small, quiet smile. They didn't know. They couldn't see the weight of the dream she was carrying underneath her simple, plain clothes. It was a dream too big, too precious, to share. And then, after years of this, after years of hunger and saving and silent sacrifice, it happened. Coin by coin, naira by naira, her savings grew. The day she had enough for a down payment on a small plot of land was the day her life truly began. It was just a dusty, empty piece of earth on the edge of the city, surrounded by stubborn grass and stones. But to Sarah, it was everything. I want you to picture her. A young woman, walking into a busy government office in Lagos, all by herself. Her hands are trembling as she fills out the forms. Her heart is pounding in her chest. And then the clerk stamps the paper. Thump! It's done. He hands her the document, and there it is. Her name, Sarah, written boldly under the word owner. Tears filled her eyes right there in that office. This wasn't just a piece of paper. It was proof. Proof that every hungry night, every mocking laugh, every aching muscle had been worth it. She had defeated every single voice that had ever told her she was nothing. From that moment, she worked even harder. Now, she was saving for bricks, for cement, for a roof. The dream was no longer abstract. It had an address. Sometimes, the money would run short, and construction would have to stop for months. So Sarah did what she always did. She found more work. And on weekends, she would go to her plot of land and carry sand herself, just to save a little on labor costs. People in the area, they would watch her. This small, determined woman moving piles of sand in the hot sun. They would shake their heads. This one? She will never finish this house. It's too much for a woman alone. But Sarah? She didn't hear them. She only heard the future sound of her key turning in a lock. Years passed. Slowly, so slowly, the walls began to rise. A kitchen, a bedroom, a small living room. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't big. But it was hers. The day the roof was finally put on, Sarah stood outside and just looked. She reached out a hand and touched the warm brick, and tears streamed down her face. "This is mine," she whispered to the wind. "No one can take this from me." Moving in was the most beautiful feeling she had ever known. She bought second-hand furniture. She found simple, colorful curtains. She painted the walls herself, humming a song as she rolled on the paint. And that first night, lying on her thin mattress in her own bedroom, in her own house, she smiled the deepest, most complete smile. Her fridge was almost empty. Her bed was still thin. But it didn't matter. Happiness wasn't in the things she owned. It was in the peace of knowing she had earned every single bit of it with her own two hands. The neighbors who had once shaken their heads in doubt now watched her in silent admiration. They had seen her struggle. They had seen her wear the same old shoes. And now they saw her, a woman who had built a home from nothing but sheer will. Sarah had finally become the woman she promised herself she would be. Independent, strong, free. But you know how life is, don't you? Just when you think the sun is shining brightest, a cloud can appear on the horizon. Success has a strange way of attracting the wrong kind of attention. Sarah's family, who had been absent for her entire struggle, suddenly began to notice. Her brother Peter, who had never offered a single naira to help, started visiting more often. But he wasn't coming to celebrate her. He would walk around, inspecting the walls, tapping the windows, asking pointed questions. "How much did this cost you? How did you afford these tiles?" And his wife, Hannah, oh Hannah, she would come along, walking through Sarah's home with a proud tilt to her chin, as if she had been the one carrying the bags of cement. She'd smile, but it was a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. There was something sharp behind it. Something waiting. At first, Sarah was too happy to care. Her heart was so full of joy that she welcomed them. She offered them tea. She tried to share her happiness. She thought maybe they had finally come to see her, to appreciate her. But in her quiet moments, sitting alone in her living room, she would reflect on her journey. She remembered the leaking roof, the hunger, the loneliness. She remembered the strength it took to keep going. This house was more than bricks and mortar. It was her. It was her soul made solid. She didn't know it yet, but that strength was about to be tested in a way she could never have imagined. The day it happened started like any other. She was coming home from work, tired but happy. The sun was beginning to set, painting the Lego sky in shades of orange and purple. She was walking down the dusty road toward her house, already thinking about resting her feet, about the simple meal she would make. But as she got closer, she stopped. A crowd had gathered near her gate. Men, women, even children were there, all whispering amongst themselves. Her heart gave a little jump. Was someone hurt? Had there been an accident? And then she saw her, Hannah, standing right in front of Sarah's gate, her arms folded tightly across her chest. She wasn't hurt. She wasn't sad. She stood there like a queen about to claim a throne that wasn't hers. A cold feeling, like a trickle of ice water, ran down Sarah's spine. Her step slowed. The happy tiredness she felt was instantly replaced by a knot of dread in her stomach. Before she could even say a word, before she could ask what was happening, Hannah's voice rang out. It was sharp. It was loud. It was meant for everyone to hear. "This is family property now," Hannah declared, her voice cutting through the evening air. "Sarah has no right to live here alone." Sarah froze. The keys in her hand, the keys to her dream, suddenly felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. The world stopped. The chatter of the crowd, the distant sound of Lagos traffic. It all faded into a dull hum. All Sarah could hear was the pounding of her own heart and the echo of Hannah's words, hanging in the air like a poison. Family property. She looked at the faces of her neighbors, people she had lived beside for years. Some were nodding, as if this made perfect sense. Others looked away, unable to meet her eyes, their silence just as painful as the agreement. Nobody stepped forward. Nobody said, "This is wrong." She was alone in that circle of judgment. And then, a familiar voice joined the cruel chorus. Her brother, Peter, walked slowly through the crowd. But this wasn't the brother she'd shared childhood secrets with. His chin was raised, and there was a cold, cruel smile playing on his lips. He looked satisfied. "Sarah," he said, his voice loud and performative, "you are living in denial. This house stands on our father's land. It belongs to all of us. You have no right to claim it as yours alone." The betrayal was a physical blow. She had helped Peter once, given him money for school fees even when she had nothing. She had defended him as a child. And now, he was the one leading the charge against her. Her hands trembled, but a fire ignited in her chest. "Peter, you know that's not true." Her voice rose, cracked with pain and a fury she didn't know she possessed. "I paid for this land. I signed the papers. Everything is in my name. I built this house with my own sweat, my own money. Not a single coin of yours was used." Instead of shame, Peter laughed. A bitter, ugly sound. "Even if you paid, it does not change blood. Family property belongs to family. You are being selfish, Sarah. You are just a woman. You cannot stand alone and keep everything to yourself. You are just a woman." The words hung in the air, and the crowd murmured its agreement. The injustice of it stole the air from her lungs. Then Hannah moved. With a smirk of triumph, she stormed into Sarah's house, her house, and moments later emerged dragging Sarah's old suitcase, the very one that had carried all her belongings through years of struggle. With no shame, Hannah flung it onto the dusty ground. The latch broke, and Sarah's clothes, her simple, humble life, spilled out for everyone to see. The cruelest sound wasn't the gasps of the adults. It was the laughter of the children, pointing and shouting, "Look, she's being chased away from her own house." Her face burned with a shame so deep it felt like a brand. She bent down, her vision blurring with tears, to gather her scattered things. But Hannah shoved the suitcase farther away with her foot. "Leave it, Sarah. This is no longer your home. You cannot win against blood." An old auntie, a woman who had once eaten food Sarah cooked, sneered from the crowd. "A woman cannot stand against her brother. You should have known better. You were always too proud." Sarah's throat closed. She wanted to scream her truth, to show them the scars on her hands, to make them understand the years of hunger. But her voice was gone, choked by the weight of their betrayal. So, she did the only thing she could do. She stood tall. She brushed the dust from her hands. She gathered her clothes with a dignity she did not feel, packed them back into the broken suitcase, and without another word, she turned and walked away. She walked away from her dream. She walked away from her home. She could feel their eyes on her back, could hear Hannah smirk without even turning around. It was the longest, loneliest walk of her life. That night, in a cramped, temporary room she rented in a stranger's house, Sarah sat on the edge of a thin mattress. The echoes of the day played over and over in her mind like a nightmare. The laughter, the smirk, the coldness in her brother's eyes, the feel of her clothes in the dirt. She should have been broken. She should have been crushed into nothing. She cried until there were no tears left. But then, something miraculous happened. From the depths of that utter humiliation, a new feeling began to grow. It wasn't anger. It was colder, sharper, and more powerful. It was resolve. The fire that had kept her going through hungry nights and leaking roofs had been banked, but now it roared back to life, fed by the fuel of their betrayal. She looked around the tiny, bleak room, and it didn't make her feel sad. It made her feel fierce. She had been here before. She had started with nothing before, and she could do it again. She whispered into the darkness, her voice steady and clear for the first time all day. "They think I am weak. They think they have defeated me. But they do not know me. They will regret this." Her silence had never been surrender. It had been patience. And now, their betrayal had unlocked a strength that had been sleeping quietly within her for years. What Peter and Hannah did not know, what no one knew, was that Sarah had a secret. The next morning, she didn't wallow. She washed her face, put on a clean dress, and walked with a calm purpose to a small, neat office in a better part of Lagos. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. And here was her truth. This small, unassuming office was the heart of a hidden empire. Filing cabinets were stuffed with paperwork. Neat stacks of folders sat on the desk. She sat down and pulled one out. It was a title deed for a building. Then another, and another. While the world saw a struggling woman in plain clothes, Sarah had been quietly, brilliantly building an empire. For years, she had taken her savings and done something brilliant with it. She sought out old, run-down properties across Lagos. She bought them cheaply, used her hard-earned knowledge to renovate them simply and well, and then rented them out. That small job at the market? It was just enough for her to live on. The real money, the growing wealth, came from here, from the steady stream of rent that flowed in from tenants who had no idea their gentle landlady was the actual owner of their building. She owned more than 10 properties. She was a businesswoman, a mogul, a silent queen. She spread the deeds out on her desk, touching each one gently. Every paper was a battle she had already won. Every signature was a night she had gone hungry. Every property was a prayer she had whispered in the dark. A faint, determined smile finally touched her lips. "They think they've taken everything from me," she said to the silent, powerful room. "But they have no idea what I hold in my hands. If they want to see what true ownership looks like, I will show them a power they cannot even touch." Sarah rented a small, clean apartment. And the beautiful, secret irony was, it was in one of her own buildings. To her new neighbors, she was just another quiet tenant who paid her rent on time. No one suspected a thing. On the outside, it looked like she had accepted her defeat. She lived simply, kept to herself. But inside that apartment, and in her office, a storm was gathering. She focused on her business with intensity she'd never had before. She expanded. She bought more properties. She started connecting with property investors, with city planners, with influential people in Lagos. At first, in these meetings she was quiet, the unassuming woman in the corner. But when she spoke, her voice was calm, and her words were filled with a hard-earned wisdom that made everyone stop and listen. People began to notice her. They admired her quiet confidence, her startling knowledge, her humility. Then came the invitation that would change everything. She was asked to speak at a major women's business forum in Lagos. When she stood on that stage, looking out at a huge crowd, her hand shook. But then she began to speak. She told them her story, not with anger, but with raw honesty. She spoke of the hunger, the leaking room, the sacrifice, the dream of a key. She spoke of the betrayal on a dusty road, the feel of her clothes being thrown into the dirt. She didn't ask for pity. She spoke of strength, of resilience, of the power of a quiet dream. When she finished, the hall was utterly silent. And then, one person stood up and began to clap. Then another, and another. Soon, the entire auditorium was on its feet, cheering for her. Tears streamed down the faces of women who saw their own struggles in hers. That day, Sarah's name spread across Lagos. She was no longer invisible. And of course, the news eventually trickled back to her old neighborhood. People were talking about Sarah, the property tycoon. Peter and Hannah first dismissed it as gossip, but then they saw her on television, being interviewed. There she was, poised, graceful, and powerful, her words flowing with a quiet confidence that commanded respect. The color drained from their faces. The woman they had humiliated, the woman they had called just a woman, had risen to a height they could never even dream of reaching. Their hollow victory turned to ash in their mouths. That night, Hannah could not sleep. John sat in silence, consumed by a guilt he was too proud to ever voice. Meanwhile, the house they had stolen began to crumble. Pipes leaked, walls cracked. The garden became a wilderness of weeds. They didn't have Sarah's skill, her determination, or her willingness to sacrifice to maintain it. The neighbors who had once supported them now gossiped. When Sarah lived here, this house was alive. Now look at it. One quiet morning, Sarah drove past the old street. She parked a distance away and just watched. The house looked tired, neglected, and sad. For a moment, her heart ached for the dream it had once represented. But then, a profound peace settled over her. she realized something incredibly important. The house had never been her source of power. It was just a symbol. She was the source. She was the foundation. And a foundation cannot be taken away. With a calm smile, she started the car and drove away, leaving the past firmly behind her. Years later, Sarah's empire stretched far beyond Lagos. She became known not just for her wealth, but for her grace and her generosity. She helped other young women get their start, offering them the encouragement she never had. She never sought revenge. She never went to court to claim the house. She never said a cruel word to Peter or Hannah. Instead, she lived her life. She let her success, her peace, and her dignity be her only reply. People who had witnessed her humiliation never forgot it. They told her story to their children not as gossip, but as a lesson. Never look down on someone, they would say. Never take what they have built, because you never know the strength they are carrying inside. Sarah's journey was not about revenge. It was about redemption. It was about healing. She lost a house, but she gained the whole world.